Hi, everyone. I am very well aware that, many of you have done so many tours of Israel, and some of you have been to Israel, and I am very well aware of that as well. But I am doing these tours, for the general knowledge and to, um, let's say, share the history of the Holy Land with as many people as possible. And I'm just starting from some basic things, plus I don't expect it to remember everything. So this is the layout of the old city of Jerusalem. We know that there are four quarters plus the Temple Mount, and you can see it very well here in the scheme, in this map. You can find it also everywhere in the old city and everywhere in Israel. We have done so many tours about each and every quarter. We've done 10 tours of the Temple Mount itself, of all the sites there in archaeology, multiple layers down. We did all that. All those recordings are available for my sponsors. There are more than 1,000 videos now, and I'm pretty sure several hundred are only about Jerusalem. Yeah, but today we're focusing on a small citadel. If you find the Jaffa Gate, which is like 9 o'clock on the map, you see a little opening there. So the Jaffa Gate, that's exactly where we're going to be today, by the Jaffa Gate. And you can see that there is something like, outlined with this grayish, brownish color. So this is a citadel we're going to talk about in this several tours every Sunday. And the Tower of David. So let me just show you what this is. And as it says in the tour description, as I always say on my tours, that this is very confusing. Yeah, so this is the Tower of David, but I'm showing you this is the Jaffa Gate, one of the entrances to the Jaffa Gate through the Jaffa Gate to the old city. And it's called Jaffa Gate because it's connected to the Jaffa Road. So the road that would take the pilgrims and actually all the travelers that arrived to the Holy Land by water. So from Jaffa, where the port was, to Jerusalem. And but so the Tower of David, this is a confusing name because first of all, the tower you see here, it's not the tower after which the museum is named. Not at all. And also, it's not about the David, actually. It's not about the biblical King David. No. We are going to spend these days, these weeks in the citadel that was built by Herod. So the Herod, right? Yeah, the one who massacred the innocents, but also the one who had built gazillions of things across the Judea, right? The Jewish province, the Judea, and and remembered, of course, by the Jews as the great builder of, a rebuilder, the one who revamped the Second Temple. The Jaffa Gate itself, I'm just providing some old photographs for you, just for the context. So the gates, the way they look now, actually they are from the Ottoman period, so in 1530s, shortly after the Ottomans invaded and conquered the lands from the Mamluks. So the Muslim warriors that had come from the north of Africa, let's put it this way, they former slaves, because that's exactly what the name means. Mamluk means the one that belongs to someone, right? And by the way, Napoleon's bodyguard was a Mamluk. So Mamluks are still there. Well, in a way, the descendants, obviously. Yeah, but the Jaffa Gate looked a little different. The Jaffa Gate actually used to be just the gate, and the walls would surround the city from all the sides. So the Suleiman the Magnificent had restored the walls almost to in the same way they had been there before. But the thing is that this land has changed hands so many times, or changed hands so many times over the course of history that it's like a one layer built on top of another, and you can actually trace the history and tell exactly by just the way the stones look that, okay, this is from the Herod's period, this is from the Ottoman period, and this and that, and this and that. The Suleiman the Magnificent couldn't have foreseen a great, breach in the wall, which was only made also by the Ottomans, but way later. That was in 1899 for the arrival of Kaiser of Germany, William II, because the Kaiser didn't want to actually jump off his horse, and he wanted to enter the city, on the horse with his entourage. So, and the Ottomans said, "Oh, of course, we would do that." So now there is an actually very convenient access to the old city with the car, but I honestly don't understand how anyone can drive in the old city, but that's okay. By the way, this road that goes all along this um, western side of the old city, well, it's actually, also the part of that road that was paved for the Kaiser by the Ottomans in 1899. So technically, this is not, well, I mean, this road had always existed, but it had been significantly developed and enlarged for the entourage. And these are photographs, that you can find in open access. It looks small on the one hand, but actually originally it was even bigger than it was. So Herod lived in the first century BCE. And well, and David lived 1,000 years earlier. So this palace has nothing to do, this citadel has nothing to do with biblical King David. But why on earth is it called after David? Oh, well, the history goes back to the Byzantine period, so let's say somewhat 15 centuries ago. And when the Christian pilgrims, well, after many weeks on the road, would see, a construction that looked like a fortress, which simply was a fortification. They identified it immediately with the Mount Zion, and they knew that on Mount Zion there had been a palace built by King David, the biblical King David. And they simply would say, "Oh, yeah, that's the Tower of David," which of course they were wrong. This is not Mount Zion. This is not the David citadel. But well, it's still a big deal. The thing is that, yeah, this is also the photograph you can find online. Well, it looks impressive from the outside, way more impressive it looks more impressive from the inside and from the top. And there is a reason for it. But the tower you still see has nothing to do, not with not with David nor with Herod. That tower is actually from the Ottoman period, because all the other peoples all the other, representatives of other religions, no matter who exactly I'm talking about, everyone would use the citadel as a very big fortification, a very important fortification, and the headquarters and the military base and the arsenal and the warehouses. And that's the minaret of the Ottoman period. So by no means this can be David's tower, whatever. No, it's just a minaret from the Ottoman period. I remind you, Ottoman period, 1517, 1917. But on this tour, which is kind of an introductory tour, we will actually, we'll be able to get those connected if you are not sure that how well you are familiar with the history of the Holy Land. So we'll get the timeline in place for sure. The entrance to the Tower of David Museum is actually not from the old city. But before we go to the museum itself, I want to enter the old city through the Jaffa Gate. And I want to walk a little bit around the citadel for you to see the tower we're actually talking about. And that's the tower I'm talking about. It's pretty high. And there is also a moat. And from here, you can actually feel, oh, okay, yeah, that's the citadel. That's almost the impregnable fortress. And this fortress, actually, a fortress had been here even before Herod. Herod was a very clever man. Well, he went nuts closer to the end of his life, he killed everyone, his wife, and then he just generously smothered her in honey and, continued, intercourse. But that's a whole different story. Let's not go into this. But yeah, he was a very clever man before that. And he had the strategic vision. So everything he had ever built was very cleverly designed, also always at the right location, and ensured his safety because he, was paranoid. He knew that exactly here at this side, this would be the most important strategic point that had to be protected that had to protect Jerusalem. It's the lowest area, and that was a problem because the lower and you can see the change in the terrain, right? So the lower it is, the easier it is for the enemies to invade. And that's why the fortress had always been here, way before Herod. Actually, the first fortress, well, the first fortification could have been built, well, not probably at times of David, but could be during the times of Solomon. But the archaeology, at least for now, is quite sure about the 8th century, like 2 centuries after Solomon, which is also quite impressive, right? So we will be talking about it. We can just read the stones. But here you can see that, so the moat actually, the moat had been made a little bit deeper even, because everyone who controlled the lands would also see as their duty to revamp, improve, and upkeep the citadel, because it granted security. It it granted stability, and the access to the Tower of David was actually from here, so from the city, which makes sense. Why would you need to build an entrance to the tower, that is to the fortress that is supposed to protect your city? Why would you build the entrance from the outside? You wouldn't. The entrance will be from here. From there was not supposed to be any entrances at all, and there were no. But now, since it's a museum, we access from the best, well, from the most convenient side. And now, so yeah, that's the best view to observe the city of Jerusalem. So the Jaffa Gate, exactly over there, the Jaffa Road, and you can see the striking difference between the West Jerusalem, which that started to develop in the second half of the 19th century, and largely early 1900s, right? And then you see the old city. Well, you can see the Grand Hotel, well, the Imperial Hotel, which is probably the youngest building on the territory. And you can see also a little bit of other churches in the old city. But so we are on the territory of the Tower of David Museum. And now you see we're this high. That's exactly what this fortress was for, to observe the territory, to make sure no one ever accesses it without your permission. And well, look at this view. So they really knew what they were doing. Did it look the same way? Did it have the same territory as it does now at times of Herod? No. And stones justify that 100%. The King David Hotel over there, by the way, the big brown building, quite monumental. No. But we know for sure that the territory included also Herod's palace. And it looks like that the Herod's palace, like his private, his residence, was actually behind that wall. The one that's, because I don't have the pointer here, so you just kind of have to trust me. You see the minaret, right? The tower, and that wall. So behind that wall, right now, there is already the territory of the Armenian quarter, and there would be also the Armenian, the Armenian school, the seminary, and then also that would be the parking lot. We have done those tours. We have explored the Armenian quarter as well, and I did talk about it, that on the territory of the parking lot there had been discovered mosaics, really big ones, and that's most likely the mosaic that used to decorate the floors of Herod's palace. So it definitely looked different. It was way bigger. Actually, it would stretch all the way, like it would just coincide with the layout of the old city from the western side. But well, it is what it is. That's what we have now. But trust me, it's more than enough. So what we have the archaeology that goes far behind, before Herod's times, but it never reaches the times of the King David for sure. So that's the tower. That's the tower where we were standing just right now, the Tower of David. Well, it says here it's the Fasael or the Hippicus Tower. The thing is, we are not entirely sure which of the towers it is. If you take a look at the model of Jerusalem of the Second Temple period, the Second Temple period, that's like 515 BCE till 70 AD. Well, that's when the Second Temple was rebuilt after the destruction of the first one, and 70 AD, that's when it was destroyed by the Romans. So I'm kind of giving you this timeline because not everyone is familiar. So that's why please bear with me, those who remember. And what we know, so this is kind of the, well, because we have the description thanks to Josephus Flavius, the great Roman historian. So we know that there were actually three not the flowers, the towers, right? And well, one was called Facile, Mariamne, and Hippicus. So Mariamne was the second wife, the poor one. The Facile and the Hippicus, we lost them. They were destroyed partially. Bits of it were discovered, and then on top of them, other civilized. Well, we know that the Crusaders did build on top of what was left of Herod's towers, and Ottomans too. So, but we have the foundations. We have, about 10 courses of Herod's period stones. So that they are the survivors. They are exactly 2,000 years old. So this is the model. This is not what it looks now. You can see that. So not let's say we are not entirely sure if that's the Hippicus or the Facile towers that we have the foundations of, but it's not really what actually matters. What matters is that we have something, and we have quite a lot from the times of King Herod, and that's what I'm talking about. So from below, you can see a lot of perfectly shaped rectangular courses of stones. And so these are the stones of Herod period. So the Herod's builders, they knew how to build without mortar, without any concrete, just putting stones one next to another, and they would fit and just perfectly. And what they do now, you can actually check how good Herod's builders were if you come to the Western Wall, and let's say, well, people leave their quitolachs there, little nose. They try to, kind of stick in between the courses, but they can only do that when there are cracks. Well, when they're cracked. But if there is no crack, if the stones contact each other, well, tightly, you cannot even stick your plastic card in between the courses of the stones. So big time. Yeah. And so the moat is still there. During the Ottoman period, the moat was used for all sorts of things. There was even a market at some point. The Crusaders actually made the moat even bigger. They deepened it because the Crusaders were so good at construction of fortresses. So they made it definitely the impregnable forces, which managed to, well, it managed to not to let the enemy on the territory of Jerusalem for almost a century. So 1099, this is the start of the Crusader period. And, almost a century, they had Jerusalem under their control. So we are overlooking now the Jaffa Road, and we are going to enter the museum again from the outside, so to speak, still not from the territory of the city. And the first hall is called On the Shore of Eternity. And just have a look that all the captions in the museum are given in three languages: Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Always. We are in the fortress. Are we in the fortress that is 2,000 years old, or let's say 100 or 200 years old? Both, I would say, because again, as I said, everyone would consider their biggest duty, of their top priority, to fortify, to improve this fortress. So these walls are a combination of Crusader and Ottoman period. So, but we can say easily that that's definitely the Crusader architecture, just improved a little bit, tweaked a little bit by the Ottomans. And of the museum, so apart from the big architectural park, also entails 9 rooms. It includes 9 rooms that all serve, like, the casemates, the arsenal, the guard rooms, well, at different periods. And we are in the first one. Oh, and well, it's it's just a very good thought because, well, it's like it's written here. It gives kind of the overview of the complex history of what kind of, civilizations and how also had existed here, and how one religion would, well, come after another, and what had been happening on this territory. But yes, so as I said, over the 4,000 years of existence of Jerusalem, right? It's the eternal city, 4,000 years, and at least for 2,800 years, there had been something built on this very territory. That's at least the archaeology we have for now. Incredible. So this museum praises the history, the 3 religions, and it educates us. And it's also challenging for those who are a little bit afraid of heights, because there's history everywhere you go. And yeah, so if you wanted to approach that showcase, yeah, you just had to be very careful because, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things beneath your feet as well. This is a very interesting Byzantines map. This is the map of the world. Map of the world from the 1500s. So die ganze Welt in einem Kleberblatt, the entire world in a clover leaf. So this is the very famous medieval period map by Buntig, well, the German cartographer. And clover was just the emblem of his hometown. I think it's Hanover, or I'm not sure which town this is, but that's not what matters. What matters is that Jerusalem is in the center of the world. I love it. I mean, just have a look at this. Half of the world is not yet there. America is just, a little bit below. Some mermaids, some stuff. Well, there's, well, England is also, well, not so bad. I think not really bad. And Jerusalem in the center of everything. I love this map because it actually shows a very Christian perspective. Obviously, it's not a Jewish, it's a Christian perspective. And Jerusalem, for many thousands of years, was seen as a Christian city. But it's way more than that. And when people realized it's not just a Christian city, it's not just a Muslim city, it's not just a Jewish city, which first thing it had been the Jewish city, right? Because this is how it evolved. As long as we understand that this is the city of the 3 religions, and we stop, I would say, dividing, and we will share, that's probably going to be a change. It's just another Bunting's map that I find absolutely fascinating. Europe being seen as a queen. Yeah, well, the Europa Prima. Well, anyway, but he had a lot of interesting maps. They were, on the one hand, confusing, obviously, but this was the educational map from the 1500s, big time. Anyway, so this is how people would see Jerusalem. And unfortunately, ever since the Crusaders were ousted from the Holy Land, we're talking early 1200s, right? So 13th century, up until Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, and then his flight from Egypt to Jaffa, and then his victory in Jaffa, and his shameful defeat in Akko, and then return to Europe. Well, the world had genuinely forgotten about the Holy Land. Yeah, Jerusalem had been there as the cradle of Christianity, but there was very little knowledge because there was almost no pilgrimage, almost, well, because it had been controlled under the Muslims. So yeah, that was a little bit challenging. And look at this, they're like, I don't know, 6 feet. No, I think even more than that, maybe 10 feet below us. There's still, well, walls, casemates, and multiple layers of history. That is true. So the original floor level was way below, way below. But anyway, the walls are still here. These are the walls, the vaults are there. And we have some exhibits to talk about. Oh my goodness, I've been talking for 30 minutes and we're just getting down to the first exhibit, but I think this has been a very important introduction just to like help us, kind of to at least keep to the storyline and just the timeline. Anyway, so we have the findings from different periods, like tablets depicting winged goddess holding lotus flowers, the Canaanite period. Why the Canaanite period? Because actually the very first people that had been living here were the Canaanite tribes, the pagans, hence the name of the land Canaan. And then during the first temple period, during well, not even the first temple, but let's say the period of King David, 3,000 years ago, there would be always this um, well, kind of the coexistence slash rivalry between the Canaanites, pagan, and the mm, monotheistic Jewish culture and religion always. And this idolatry issue, which is one of the fundamental things in Judaism, right? And for every monotheistic religion. So these idolatry issues, they were very acute, and we will see that over the course of many centuries, actually. Also, there can be found a lot of seals from different periods. Um, um, there could be there they were found great deal of coins from various periods as well that only testify to the idea of Jerusalem actually being a very important hub as well. But that's just, well, one thing. Then okay, monks, limestone, first century, second temple period, and we see a lot of stone vessels, which is also indicative of the Jewish presence because the stone vessels they do not get contaminated. This has a lot to do with the rules of kashrut because you cannot mix the milk, the dairy and the meat, and the stone vessels do not absorb the particles of food. So the stone vessels are a lot simpler. Or the sword from the Roman period, because yes, of course, the Romans could not but have uh, controlled these land, and Herod was actually the client king of Judea appointed by the Romans. Big time. Now we have these beautiful coins. There you go. Hoard of coins minted under the emperors Maurice Tiberius, gold, Byzantine period. So Byzantine period, we are talking, well, I say, let's say 325. That's around the time Constantine stopped persecuting Christians and recognized Christianity. And ever since then, and up until the arrival of Muslims in the early 600s, this would be the Byzantine period. So obviously, during the Byzantine period, this is when the big pilgrimages actually started. And during that period, exactly, the Tower of David got its name. This is a very interesting detail. Would you believe it if I told you that it's actually from the Muslim period, even though we do know that in Islam you're not, well, they would only resort to, ornaments, graphic ornaments. You're not allowed to paint any, human beings, living beings. Well, this was the decoration. This is the early Muslim period. So you will even see the dates, like it's basically early 600. This is when Islam was established as a religion, and shortly after that, it came to the whole. Well, it came to the whole and came here. And well, this dates to the 8th century BCE, partly detailed from the window balustrade. So the early Islamic architecture, well, was so diverse and so very different from what we are used to. And one day I'll take you to the Rockefeller Museum, and we will see some absolutely amazing things there. I promise. So I just made a promise, so I'll 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 have to do this. Look at this, the Maltese cross, right? Look at this beautiful neck piece. So the collar decorated with crosses, Crusader period. Yeah. So Terra Sancta Museum is the museum located in the old city, just right at the start of the Via Dolorosa. And together with you, we did a very detailed Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering of Christ. I think it took us like 4 episodes, right? Like 4 hours. That's a very detailed tour. Or, okay, we have a little bit something from the Ayyubid period. So um, well, the the Ayyubid period is actually very short-lived. It's also the part of the second Islamic period, but the Ayyubids were very intellectual. They they left great variety of books on different sciences, and well, this book is here. Well, actually, Islamic manuscript describing Saladin's weapons, and Saladin was the leader of the Ayyubids, the one who managed to defeat the Crusaders, but he did not completely defeat them. He just ousted them from Jerusalem, but he let them stay on the coastal plain, and he still encouraged the pilgrimage. And there was this kind of coexistence. So Saladin was actually a wise ruler. But anyway, so very interesting period, and we will be talking more about each of these periods. We will be talking more. So this is kind of the introduction, how much there is to talk about. How much? I like these ones. These vessels are so cute, and then like the colors. Like, I mean, just appreciate the colors and also the condition that they are in. They just they're just really, really cute. So what we have here, so the fire grenades with designs in relief, pottery, 13th, the 14th century Mamluk period. So many would say that the Mamluks, former slaves, because actually, the Mamluks, the army, the first army of the Mamluks was basically consisted in teenage boys that had been kidnapped from the territory of, starting from actually the Caucasus, including Georgia. There were several important leaders of the Mamluk period that actually were Georgians that had been kidnapped by um, had been kidnapped at their childhood, like 5, 7, 10 years of age, and had grown into just these war machines. Yeah, that was a big deal. But anyway, so many believe that, well, since Mamluks were former slaves, they were like barbarians. That's not actually true. They were really, really advanced with everything that dealt with war. Yeah, and I think these beautiful grenades, they're cute. When I first saw them, I was sure they were, let's say, oil bottles, like the oil that would be used for the oil lamps during the Roman period. Or I thought maybe they was, for the perfumes. And then I found that they were fire grenades. And it's such a shame because they would throw them and then they would break into pieces. Like, why making them so beautiful then? Well, anyway, do you see what I'm talking about? Look at this tile. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And it's the Islamic period, the Ottoman period. Beautiful, right? So 19th century. Well, but also it's important to remember that the pottery is some of the best ways for the archaeologists to actually uh, identify a period. Well, carbon 14 can help you a lot. Like if it's organic, yeah, for sure. Like it's the best way, the most reliable method for date of dating. But sometimes you really need to identify whether it's, let's say, the first half or the second half, or let's say the 30s or the 60s of a certain century. And this is when the pottery comes to rescue, because pottery, so frequently used, would always, incorporate the slight changes, let's say, even in the contents of the clay, and whatnot, and the designs. So the copy of the keys to the city of Jerusalem offered by the Ottoman mayor for the British army. So offered to General Allenby in 1917 after the Ottomans, who had been allies with Germany, lost in the First World War the copies of the keys, just the symbolic keys. So that's where that marks the start of the Mandate period. And so this is the final. You see, it's written in Hebrew, and this is the letter from the Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben Gurion, replying to the boy Mir Weitz that was given to the Weitz family. So that's I will get back to it, but a little later. So that's actually that's a well-known story. It's well, yeah, we will get to that. We're not going to concentrate on this at the moment. So the periods again. So the first period is Canaanite period, right? And this is the old name of this land, of this promised land, was the Canaan. That's exactly why. So we are talking here. Wow, year 3300. So this is approximately when the Canaanite period was, and it ended up basically with the arrival of King David, who had purchased a big plot of land from the Jebusites, one of the Canaanites people, and where he built his city. But we know now that David never really lived on the territory of the modern old city. No, David built himself a city and a palace where the city of David is, which is a little bit down below from the old city. But anyway, so that's just it. Now, the first temple period, not David, but Solomon built the temple. But David, we will talk about it, had the tabernacle with the convent, with the Ark of the Covenant in his palace, stored in the city of David. But then, so after the Solomon and up until the first temple was destroyed, that's the first temple period. Then, so let's say 538. Well, some claim that's a little bit later, but okay, that's the second temple period. So the second temple period starts when they kind of started rebuilding the second temple, when the Jews were allowed to return from the Babylonian exile, because Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, had destroyed the temple, and for about 50 years, Jews were allowed to return to Jerusalem. But this changed, and then they rebuilt the temple, and up until 70 Common Era, yeah, everything lasted. The Roman period, right? Okay, let's keep it like that. Then the Byzantine period, so you already know, so 324, 325. This is when the Christianity had became officially legit religion, and up until 638, when when the arrival of Muslims, happened here. Then the early Islamic period, or the first Islamic period, up until the arrival of Crusaders, 1099. Then the Crusader period. So the Crusader period, with regards to Jerusalem, ended 1187, and for a little longer it was with regards to the coastal plain, but then actually by early 1200s they also would be ousted from the entire Holy Land. And then the Mamluks would oust the Ayyubids. The Ayyubids remained up until 1260. Then the Mamluks in 1517, the Ottomans up until the 1917. And then 1917, so Allenby arrives, the British Mandate begins up until 1948. And then this is when the modern state of Israel history begins. They also have this interactive globe. It shows you the story of different, Jewish communities and the connections with Jerusalem. Um, I knew I had like 8 more rooms to film, and obviously I didn't do it within one day. It's a torture doing it within one day. This video took me yeah, we could say, yeah, 3 years in making, um, because it only opened in 2023 after the very long restoration and everything, and the organization. And then I left Israel, and there was also war. The museum was closed, and then I would be coming back off and on. I was there, and I would come and go and film, and even my colleagues also filmed some bits for me. But altogether, a lot of my studies in 2023 also took place in the museum because it gives you so much, information. And well, this is just me listening to the audio guide, and one of the times, I don't know, I think I have been to this museum like 15 times, and it's never just like for 1 hour. Never. You just, it's impossible. It's always like half a day at least that you spend there. But you know what? It's also when it's hot, you can just hide away in the air-con rooms. And this is like amazing because it's not easy, being outdoors in the summer. Even now, it's already too hot. Yeah. So let's have a little walk, just as much as time permits. Now we have quite a generous amount of time to explore the garden. So this is the garden we actually saw from the Tower of David almost at the start of the tour. And remember, I told you that stones can speak with us. That is true. We just need to know. We just need to interpret the language. That's it. And well, obviously, all of that was not accessible to general public. It had always been, very strategic territory under control, of the respective armies, obviously. And a lot of these things you see now, let's say this wall, this hollowing and that hollowing, it had been uncovered. That's important to understand that it had been uncovered. So it was not, it was kind of more or less, well, not exactly flat, but a lot of the things that we can see obviously were covered. I will show you where exactly the ground level used to be, let's say during the Ottoman period. Right now, this garden is a big venue for different events. There are always this light shows. Well, once a week, there are light shows. Well, maybe actually it's going to be more than just once a week, but for now, that's how it used to be. Marilyn, thank you so much for the tip. And there are, I don't even know how to put it. You could, when, let's say you see, well, you can find a cistern. You can find actually a number of cisterns. So when you see the two fishes, that's clearly the Byzantine period, because this is how Jesus used to be, coded when Christianity was not yet recognized, as a legit religion. So in the Byzantine period, there remained a citadel, absolutely, and in Jerusalem, regardless of what period you're talking about, the accumulation of water, like every drop counted, So there you can find a lot of cisterns all around Jerusalem, and not all in Jerusalem. So this is how they collected the water. Obviously, it doesn't mean that it was discovered just like this. Obviously, arch was collapsed, and you can find also another arch. So yeah, of course, it was found on the bottom, but then it had been put together for us so we could have like a better understanding of how things actually looked. whenever you see the plastered walls of this type of hollowings in the ground, well, you can easily say this was a cistern to hold the water. That can be easily done. And so this archway, don't expect it, don't expect it to have been found like this. Obviously, it was not. It was actually placed back because it was discovered obviously in a collapsed state under the rubble. It was all covered. It was underground, obviously. By the way, this archway is from the uh, Ottoman period, and the Ottomans they and it's not only on the Ottomans. It's basically, again, I would say it's on the one hand human laziness, on the other hand, it's simply the common sense. And it also makes dating a lot more confusing to archaeologists because there is this thing as the secondary use or even the third use of construction materials of different decorative elements. Well, because that's exactly how things were. Let's say the Crusaders came, ousted the infidels, and they would not just simply destroy what they had built. They would be using these materials to build something of their own. And they would be using much older construction materials, and then you never know. Okay, which period is that? So, well, but we again, as I said, we can identify, things here and there. It also gives you the layout of Jerusalem at different periods. The way the old city looks now, it's not the same as it looked 1,000 years ago. We also have to it's not just 100% exactly this way. And Jerusalem also changed its layout. It used to be way bigger. The old city used to be way bigger, and it used to be way smaller. It depends. We have talked about it on multiple tours. Also here you can see these elements, lentils found, lattices found it from multiple periods. Well, I think this one is pretty much clear. This is the Christian period, the Byzantine period, and well, the archaeological the things that we find here. So they were discovered. On the territory of the citadel or in the vicinity of the citadel. Also, they also have obviously a lot of exhibits on loan or be it from other museums on the territory of Israel and or also even from Europe. And now we're going to the subterranean, part. So that part was all covered. It was just ground. It was the ground level. I mean, above this, so this where we were, it was the ground level, and this is like it was all buried under the I don't know meters of soil, stones, and whatnot. And look, there is so much more, so much more. Well, you can see that the paving is obviously new, but it wasn't paved this way at all. Um, yeah. And anyway, so we spoke about the oldest excavations, let's say the oldest stones discovered date back to somehow like 2,800 years. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So you see the slightly irregular stones. So they are identified as the stones from the time of King Hezekiah, first temple period, right? Obviously, King Hezekiah didn't look like this, but it's the way it was depicted in the 17th century, looking like a European king with a crown, with the ermine. Well, that anyway. So the Hezekiah, the one. Well, we have spoken so much about Hezekiah. I'm not going into details, but Hezekiah managed to prevent the city from the invasion, from the Assyrian invasion. He had built a big a tunnel, a big waterway, right? The Hezekiah tunnel to make sure that even under the siege, that Jerusalem would have always access to the water. And also he built another wall, like an extra protection to the city. And this wall had what was found. And there is so much proof, extra biblical proof to what is actually mentioned in the Old Testament, that it's like really mind boggling. So the stones over there, like exactly in the center, so they are believed to be from the Hezekiah period, which is incredible. And also stones next to it, also small ones, square shaped. Hold on a second. Yeah, let's do it this way. So the more regular ones are believed to be from the Hezekiah period, and the less soft and regular ones, right, the less outlined ones are believed to have been from the so-called Hashmonite period, which will not really mean a lot to you. But what I'm going to say is that, the history, well, the holiday, Jewish holiday called Hanukkah, right? So this has a lot to do with this Hasmonean period. So in year 300, so Alexander the Great comes to the Holy Land, and this is when the Hellenistic period begins. With time, the Hellenistic culture becomes too invasive and imposed itself upon the Jewish culture, which brought, the Jewish people and Jewish identity to crisis. And eventually, group of, a big family just rose against the Hellenistic culture, the Greeks, and eventually they won. And so they also had built a lot of things in Jerusalem. So that's basically the story. And the last thing that I will be talking about, I don't have any intention to overrun, and it's not going to really save us much time because we've only just like seen one room, the big archaeological garden, but we also walked on top. And this is definitely not a waste of time. There is one thing, there is this mosaic. The mosaic looks interesting. This is one of the most well preserved mosaics that had been discovered in the north of Israel, in the Bet Alpha. Well, there's a kibbutz Bet Alpha. There was a national park Bet Alpha, in the Galilee, and there was discovered the mosaic from the Byzantine period, and this is just only part of it. It actually tells you the story of the binding of Isaac. You can see, a man with a sword holding a baby, right? And then you see a ram, and then you see an angel. The providence, like, right, like not the providence, but you see the hand of God stopping Abraham from sacrificing his own son. So this is the Old Testament story told in the Byzantine period by means of this mosaic, and it was found in an amazing condition alongside other amazing mosaics. They're truly unbelievable, and I saw them, with my own eyes. It's still there on the floor in Bet Alpha. Absolutely a must thing to see. And you know what? On these very mosaics, they also have the menorahs. So this is incredible. And so what we're looking at definitely a Christian narrative based on the Jewish narrative. And all of that is also incorporated. Well, a lot of this, I would say, notions coming from Judaism, well, that's the base for Christianity. And Islam, being the youngest of the three religions, also, comes from these religions, but they just sin a little differently. Well, let's say if in Christianity, Jesus was the sacrifice. Jesus was the Lamb of God, right? And in Islam, they just believe that it was not Isaac, but it was Ishmael, the other son of of Abraham. And Muslims consider themselves the descendants of Ishmael. That's basically it. But the idea is, well, it comes from the same, right? It's just from there. So this is the idea of the museum as well. So no matter how challenging and complex the history of this land is, it's the cradle of the three religions. It's just the only land they have. And this is, well, I do not see it as something political. I see it as a way to actually connect the three religions and to show that all the three religions have the right to exist here, and that's what we should be proud of, and that's what we should be protecting and guarding. So next time we're going to start from here, from the second room out of the nine, and we're not even done in the garden. So it's going to take us some weeks to explore this amazing museum. Now the Q&A time. That's not a bad timing, actually. Not a bad timing. I think we are doing great. But let me know what you think. And I also tried to not to hurry too much. I wanted to be also pace myself, wanted to give you a little more, anchors and let's say associations, some timeline, but didn't want to be very detailed with regards to specific periods because too many numbers, too many figures, just confusing. We don't need that. We need to understand the approximate, periods. So the chat is open for your questions. I'm going to share with you the links for the upcoming weekend. So the next episode is scheduled for the same time next Sunday. There you go. And also, if you enjoyed the tour, I would appreciate your support. All my tours are free to join at your tips. I highly rely on them. You can either send them via PayPal, or you could also buy me a coffee or coffees. So the links are all there. I'm going to be sharing the recording. So I see that we have a little more people now that we originally have. So hi, everyone who joined us a little later. And you will be able to catch up with the recording. You will find it on my YouTube channel. You can always check my website, annayourguide.com, and it will take you to my YouTube and elsewhere. So let me know if you would like me to comment on something. We will be getting back to a few things that I haven't mentioned today, but just give it time. There are a few things that are quite important, and it's been an introduction, so we just kind of lightly marked a few things, or important periods or important exhibits from the periods. And every room is going to be devoted to a certain, to this particular period. And we're going to be talking more about the items. So you're not going to miss out on anything, on the important things. Okay, let me just double check that the chat is here. I'll stick around for a while, but I hope you have found it interesting, not too nerdy, because I mean the worst thing that can happen when you turn a tour of the museum like this into a lecture, and this is when it doesn't really sink in the way you want it to sink in. So that's just how I see it. Sharon, yes. So you asked me multiple times to start the tours. So I have decided, okay, I can't be just putting it off anymore. So I'm doing these tours, and I knew you would be. I knew you expected it. You've been waiting for it. So you're most welcome, Sharon. I'm glad that you are glad. Hi, Dorley, Ken, dear. It was interesting. Definitely not a boring lecture. I'm happy. I'm happy. Have you been to the museum? I'm not sure. So probably not. I don't know. Cindy, thank you so much. Great tour again, Anna. I wish I had your knowledge. I wish I had knowledge about well, 6 years ago. Better late than never. Okay, I understand. Well, it doesn't. Well, it doesn't mean I just. Well, it's always about hitting the books before the tour for every tour. It's not like I just have it all in my head. I mean, I do have it in my head, but you always need to look things up. You always need to hit the books before every tour. Wonderfully overwhelming. Thank you, Adrian. I take it as a compliment. But yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. And without these virtual tools, which I started way before my guide courses started, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish my studies. I wouldn't have been able to pass the exams because how one without any, background and preparation can just understand and comprehend all that, I have no idea. Jerusalem history is incredible. Thank you so much, Natasha. This is such an amazing museum. You explained everything so well. Thank you so much, Natasha. It really means a lot to me. I'm hearing it not for the first time. I studied it all in high school, Dorley says. Of course, and it was boring. Yeah, I know it can get boring. And of course, this is what you learn at school. Yeah, but seeing it also walking those grounds, touching those stones, because you can touch those stones. You can't touch the exhibits, but you can touch what there is in the archaeological garden. That's just, a whole different experience. Thank you, Adrian. You've been to the museum years ago, yeah. So, but then it was closed and it only opened. I think it was 2023 when it opened, early 2023 when it opened, something like that. So I had been there enough, before the war started and everything, but I think maybe just never really enough. I can never get enough of the Tower of David Museum. Don't get me wrong, there are many other amazing museums. And actually, there are more than 200 museums in Israel. It's way more per capita than everywhere else in the world. It, yeah, it's like, it's incredible. So there is so much more to film for you. Yeah, his teacher was terrible. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry about it. Well, thank you, everyone. It really, really means a lot to me that you have enjoyed this tour. And thank you, Adrian. A big compliment. Thank you so much. So I tried to make it entertaining. I tried to connect it also to some of the things we have seen before on the tours and that you may be familiar with. So Dolly says, I went to the Tel Aviv Museum many, many times, especially when okay. Yeah, of course. Well, Tel Aviv Museum, there's also a lot to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think my favorite museum is probably the I don't even know. No, I'm not going to tell you which my museum is favorite because I don't know. Now I think it's maybe Rockefeller Museum, but then maybe no, maybe it's just the Israel Museum, or maybe it's no, I don't know. That's too Raleigh Museum, it's about art, right? But I'm talking about like, archaeology. Well, art, yeah, Raleigh Museum is amazing. I have been there, I think just twice only, but I'm talking about archaeology. So Maria is saying, thank you for some more of the heritage of Israel. By the way, I got interested about the clover thing and Googled it. That the clover is the emblem of the city of Perth in Bavaria. And please do get nerdy now and then. Okay, thank you so much. So I didn't remember which city exactly we were talking about, but yes, it clearly was a German Christian perspective on the world, on the way the world looked. Oh, well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah, true, but it's so the Raleigh Museum still doesn't have this much. It's it's not enough. I'm talking about like big archaeological museums encompassing all these periods. So I was thinking about more like, you know, the Israel Museum, the Rockefeller Museum, the Museum of the Land of Israel. So that's what I was thinking. But yeah, I got it. I got it, Dolly. And again, like you're local, so you have studied it at school. So it's not something new to you. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It's been fun. So I will be sharing the recordings of today's tours a little later. And, I will always appreciate your support. Thank you for just being here for me. And I appreciate it beyond words. Thank you so much. Yes, Dorley. So if you want to see the original Dali or Impressionist or other 20th century artists, you would go to Raleigh Museum. Or if you're lazy or don't have a car, you'll go to Tel Aviv Gallery as well. But Now it's not there on display. The most precious works are still in the storage. That's what I saw when I was there last year. So we'll see. The Rockefeller Museum, it's still pending. I don't know actually if they're going to close it for the sake of the hotel. If they do, it's going to be a very big mistake. I hope they won't, but I filmed it all. And after this museum, I will be taking you to the Rockefeller one. I will take it to the Rockefeller Museum, I promise, because that's like the jaw-dropping museum. True, darling. You have the museum of your own. Especially if you get especially lazy, you just need to go downstairs. That's it. Thank you everyone for joining. And I will see you next week. So more tours will be scheduled. I will be sending the newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter, and most of you are. Thank you. Bye bye.